Keir Starmer says that things will get worse, and I am sure he's right. They're getting worse because he unleashed a curse and surrendered without a fight. Britain is dying. It's giving in to those whose impulses are basest. And if you complain, Keir will throw you in jail and claim that you're a racist. It's This Week in Jihad, ladies and gentlemen, and that was the revelation that just came upon me. Whenever I see David Wood post on X, formerly known as Twitter, the revelation comes upon me. And so I just broke out into a cold sweat, and here we have the poem to begin this action-packed episode. And David, I challenge anyone in the world to produce a poem like it.
It is kind of funny, Robert, because you basically got two things at work here that completely destroy the arguments. That one of the main arguments the Quran gives, that it's amazing supernatural eloquence or something like that, that proves that it's from God. And so there are two main problems with that. One, you always, off the top of your head, can make something that's better than anything we read in the Quran. So that's one, right? That's coming from our side. We think it's ridiculous because Robert Spencer constantly comes up with way better stuff than the Quran. But the Islamic flip side is that every random Muslim I ever talk to can come up with something better than the Quran. Because I'll say, look, it says right here, fight those who do not believe in Allah. And they'll say, oh, what he really means there is only fight in self-defense. It's like, well, if that's what he meant, why didn't he say it like that? Oh, because he wanted to say it that way, even though he really meant this completely different thing, which is like very different from what he was saying. And it's like, okay, so you are actually way clearer than Allah. You're a much better communicator than Allah. So the Quran would actually be better if you, my Muslim, or random Muslim, were writing it, because then it would actually say what Allah meant. Whereas Allah in the Quran has some sort of cosmic Tourette syndrome. It just keeps blurting things out in a way that does not convey what he actually means, and so on. So massive problems with this dumb argument.
Well, you know, David, there's no God but Allah, and the Dawagandists are his prophet. Anyway, we got lots of jihad today, and I think the biggest one is the absolutely deliciously ironic story out of Germany. Now, of course, people were killed. I'm very sorry that people were killed, but they were killed in Solingen, Germany, at a festival of diversity. And this is Isa al-Hassan, who went to the festival of diversity and murdered 3 people, injured quite a few others. He is a migrant from Syria. Now, not only did the Festival of Diversity come back to bite them at their most diverse, but the reaction has been just as comical and absurd. All right? In the first place, we have the fact that Isa al-Hassan says he is an Islamic State jihadi. All right? He made that very clear. The Islamic State issued a communique, ISIS as it's known, saying, yes, that's our guy, this was our attack. What do you think the German police are saying? We can just fill in the blanks here. You know already.
This is usually when we hear police are searching for a motive.
That is correct.
It's either searching for a motive or he's crazy. Those are the only two options for every terrorist attack.
That's right. And the Washington Post reported that the cops are... Actually, this is exactly what they said. A motive remains unclear. But
isn't that funny? like I don't even have to follow the story. You can just ask, hey, what are they going to say? And we know it because it's what we see every time. He's crazy, or they're searching for a motive. And
that's right.
I pointed out before, it must be frustrating as an Islamic State jihadi or any other kind of jihadi. You're like, hey, I'm trying to get my point across. I want my message to be clear. The message is, I'm here to subjugate you all in the name of Allah. And they say, oh, we can't figure out his motive. And he's like, what are you saying? I just told you my motive. I told you exactly word for word what my motive is. Still can't find a motive. Guys, what do I need to do? Do I need to write it down? Do I need to write it on a billboard? What do I have to do to get you to understand that my motive is exactly what I'm saying that it is? Oh, we still can't find a motive. It's like I would be frustrated. I would be frustrated. It's almost like you would have to do a terrorist attack after the terrorist attack, just to, I don't know. It's like you do your terrorist attack. They're like, we refuse to understand you. Like, oh, I'll do another terrorist attack just so I'll terrorize you guys until you admit what my real motive is. And they still won't get it. It's just weird stuff.
They'll just say you're mentally ill. But never fear. This is German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and he is on the job. And he has
Colonel Klink there.
Schultz. Yes. The Schultz was the only guy Colonel Klink thought was stupid. And Schultz is furious, he says, about the attack. But the other thing about Schultz, you may remember from the show, he knows nothing. And so he has proposed a very tough measure in the wake of the Solingen Jihad attack. He is going to ban knives. Because the guy went on a stabbing spree. Yep, that'll fix it, am I not? No more jihad.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to cut their, bratwurst and stuff like that, but
no, you can have them in private, but you can't take them out of the house.
Okay,
what reason? I actually got the Vice Chancellor, Robert Habeck, saying that what we need are weapon-free zones. He says, no one in Germany needs bladed and stabbing weapons in public. We no longer live in the Middle Ages. That's exactly what he said, and in that tone of voice.
But they kind of are, right? They're heading back rapidly.
That's right.
It's like the entire German government a couple years ago said, how can we head back to the Middle Ages? We really want to head back to the Middle Ages. It's our dream come true.
Yep. They actually are heading back to the period when the Ottoman jihadis were menacing Europe and were making Europeans all over the continent live in fear that they were going to take over and completely destroy the civilization of Europe. And they came close. So the Germans, they are living those glorious days. All right. Yeah, that's another thing. Thank you. There was somebody here in the chat says, wasn't the guy supposed to have been deported? That's another comic opera aspect of this. Isa al-Hassan was supposed to be deported last year, but nobody actually got around to deporting him. And so he was on hand to attack the Festival of Diversity this year. All right. Yes?
Oh, no, I was just thinking, like, is Islam really pro-diversity? Remember Muhammad said, I will expel the Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula, will not leave any but Muslims. They're only pro-diversity when they're in the minority. And sometimes they want to make it clear, guys, this is not our long-term goal. We are actually here to subjugate you. And then they try to make it as clear as possible, and everyone refuses to listen.
Yep. Schultz, it's just perfect, because you may recall, ladies and gentlemen, the famed TV show Hogan's Heroes from the 1960s, if you are even older than I am. And there was it was a comedy about a prison camp of Nazis, and the prisoners, the Allied prisoners, were running a spy ring, a very sophisticated one, right out of this prison camp under the nose of the moronic Commandant Colonel Klink and Sergeant Schultz, who was a guard, who would always see them. He would always end up walking in on them and catching them when they're going through the secret passageway or working on some rocket or something. And he would just say, I see nothing, because he knew that if he saw something, it would cause more trouble than if he just kept quiet and pretended not to have noticed anything. And I think that kind of sums up Olaf Scholz, that he sees.
That sums up the entire German government. Yes,
and the governments of the West. Our friend Keir Starmer in Britain.
Yeah. We're always like Hey, look what we found here. Look what we found. It's right here. It's right here. And then we see nothing.
Exactly.
You can't make us
Exactly.
see.
So the Taliban is trying to make people see. And that's our
They're
next
trying.
big story. We got a lot of big stories this week. Uh, and so the big story out of Afghanistan is that the Taliban is trying to alert people to the nature of the status, I should say, of women in Islam. And so they have implemented, or they are implementing, new rules that say that women must cover themselves entirely in public. No more of this showing the eyes like some trollop.
Yeah.
They are have to be completely covered.
Yeah.
And
Otherwise, you're a dirty whore trying to get molested.
exactly, 3359, chapter
That's the
33,
Quran.
verse 59 of the Quran says, "Do not be sure to cover. Draw your veil over your bosom, lest you be molested." So the subtext is, if you are not thus covered, you can be molested. Fair game. So anyway, they not only have to completely cover, but their faces and voices must be concealed if they leave their homes. So they cannot raise their voices because they would be drawing undue attention to themselves, once
Hmm.
again, as shameless harlots. They're barred from singing, barred from reading the Quran publicly. Their clothing must be not too thin, not too tight, not too short. Taxi drivers must not transport a woman without a hijab. And let's see, there's a couple other things. Yeah, playing music in vehicles is prohibited, which is probably a good idea because if you're strumming a guitar, you might, and trying to steer, you might have trouble. Men are barred from looking at women's faces in public, and I think, well, that's a bit redundant since you can't see women's faces in public. There are no women's faces in public. But anyway, also trimming or shaving their beards. Now, the
Hmm.
interesting thing about this is that in the wake of these regulations, David, the Taliban has invited the rest of the Islamic world to emulate it and to adopt Sharia. It says that the Muslim nations worldwide should take inspiration from the Taliban system and establish Sharia based systems in their own country. And in response to that, that was a call from the Taliban spokesman who's been there many years, Zabihullah Mujahid. And in response to that, there was kind of a huffy article where a women's rights activist, with whom I am not otherwise familiar, Mariam Maruf Arwin, she says the Taliban are trying to justify their recent 3 years of crimes under the name of implementing Sharia. And she says that what they are doing is un Islamic because there's a hadith that says that knowledge is obligatory for both men and women. So the Taliban are not Islamic. Is that right, David? All these things they're doing, this has nothing to do with true Islam. Am I right?
Uh, yeah. Welcome to Fantasyland. You can go to. I've seen. There was an article several years ago where it was on CNN, and it was by some woman who had converted to Islam, and she's like, "I had to investigate this, and I found out that it's not what I expected at all. And Muhammad was a great champion of women's rights, and he championed even women learning, and said knowledge is obligatory, and so on." Anyway, you look at it, it's talking about religious knowledge of the basic practices of Islam. So yes, women are supposed to know what they're supposed to do in Islam, but it gets quote completely misrepresented as, oh yes, this is encouraging women to go to universities and get great educations, and so no, it's not. Read the actual passages, you giant morons who think who think that well, I read an article on how Islam is a great feminist religion and therefore I know more than all these mullahs. You giant Western. It's the Islam is the only topic on the planet where the less you know about it, the more of an expert you are in it. You can't do this anywhere else. You can't just, oh, I've never been to a math class in my life, therefore I can tell the world's greatest mathematicians how they're wrong and I'm right about math. Um, and so it's just, yeah, weird, dumb situation. But I have to say, Robert, we look, you can see, you can look at pictures of people in Afghanistan in the 1950s and so on. It looks like a Western nation. And here you see how rapidly things can change. The same thing in Iran. Look at pictures from back in the day in Iran. Looked like a Western nation. And then there was a massive crackdown. But I have to say, Robert, Islam, whether Sunni or Shia, seems, whenever you have enough people who want to take it seriously, to start cracking down on women. Can we predict that as Western nations invite more of this in, that this is going to happen more and more and more in Western nations? And if they really don't, if they never put a stop to it, it's just going to, the exact same thing is going to happen?
I would expect so, but on the other hand, you never know. Maybe it'll be different this time.
Oh, yeah.
1400 years one way, and
Yeah. Then it'll all be different. But I mean, it is amazing how rapidly this can happen. So again, you go back several decades, Iran and Afghanistan, which we look at as like the most backwards places in the world, looked like Western nations. They had women going to universities to learn to study technology and so on, and become engineers, all this stuff. And now they can't even walk out in public without being harassed unless they dress a certain way.
So, David, let me play Allah's advocate for a minute and ask you this. There are other Sharia states. I mean, you just mentioned Iran. And so Afghanistan has all these new rules that we just spoke about, that women can't even raise their voices in public, can't do all these things in public. Iran doesn't have rules like that. It has a hijab law, but it doesn't have a law that you have to be fully covered. It doesn't have a law that says women can't speak in public or something like that. So surely the Taliban, they're extremists, right? They're going too far. Islam doesn't really teach these things.
Yeah, but here's the issue that we got. So the Ottoman Empire lost in World War I, and then the Caliphate collapsed, and you just had tons of Muslims around the world. All of a sudden, wait a minute, we've had a caliphate for 13 centuries, and now all of a sudden we don't. Lots of Muslims viewed it as we lost to Western nations. Somehow everyone became more powerful than us, and we've just got a problem here. This isn't working anymore. We need to go ahead and modernize. And that's why in the 50s and 60s, you had Muslim nations looking modern. They tried to adapt to the West. The West had won. The West had defeated it. But there was an alternative interpretation of the evidence. And the alternative interpretation was, you didn't lose because they're somehow culturally superior or more right. You lost because Allah's not blessing you to defeat them, because you have not imposed Sharia ardently enough. You haven't done it. You're not doing it right, so Allah's not blessing you. And that's why you ended up with the revolution in Iran and all the Muslim Brotherhood and so on. You ended up with people, eventually ISIS and so on. It's, we need to crack down. We need to crack down on all heresy, on all disobedience, on all opposition to Sharia. And we need to impose Sharia fully for Allah to bless us and make us successful. And we're still seeing that. We're still seeing the crackdown, and apparently encouraging it in every possible way we can.
So what the Taliban is doing, in other words, is entirely Islamic, because they are just trying to make sure to bring the richest of Allah's blessings by not even making it close to possible to transgress. That if a man, obviously, we should note that the covering of women is so that men will not be tempted. Men don't have any obligation to control themselves. They have to women have to cover themselves, so there's no reason for a man not to control himself. And so if covering your hair is not enough, then you have to cover your face and even your eyes. And then that's how we get to the Taliban's laws.
And the result, of course, is that men never have to learn to control themselves. And then Western nations say, hey, let's take a bunch of these guys who've never learned the slightest bit of self-control around women, because we keep women bundled up around them. And then let's take all these guys and put them in Western nations with girls walking around in Daisy Dukes, and wonder why these guys lose their minds and go on raping sprees.
Yeah, it's a mystery. They must be mentally ill. Okay.
Someone's definitely mentally ill here, Robert. I'm just not sure it's the jihadis.
I think it might be Olaf Scholz. Anyway, we got more mental illness, David. There is plenty of mental illness to go around. Nobody needs to go without. Here's some more. That is, in the foreground, with his back to us, the famed Russian strongman Vladimir Putin.
What a weakling.
And that is Ramzan Kadyrov, his client ruler in Chechnya, which is, of course, an Islamic entity inside Russia. And he is, of course, kissing the Quran. Now, this caused some controversy, and it was a funny thing, David, because I was working a little bit ahead, which I do sometimes at Jihad Watch, because I had some things to do that afternoon. I scheduled some posts to put up that afternoon while I'd be out of the office. And one of them was Putin kissing the Quran. And I said, there's going to come a time when he regrets having done this. Mm-hmm. When the Islamic jihadis he's appealing to will make him regret having done this. And I went out, I took care of what I had to take care of, and came back before it had posted, but there was news, and the news was that Islamic State jihadis had taken control of a prison colony and slashed a guard's throat, made fun of Putin, taunting him for his weakness. Now, why did... David, I got a question for you about this. Mm-hmm. Why didn't they say, wait a minute, Putin kissed the Quran. He's our friend. We won't bother him. We won't take over this penal colony. We won't cut a guard's throat because he is our friend. He's on our side. Look, he kissed the Quran. Why didn't they do that?
Because they smell. People think when you do some sort of gesture like this that their hearts are going to melt. In reality, they smell weakness. And they're like, "Oh, now he's trying to cozy up to us. This means he's got some problems, and he's getting desperate and weak. Now's our time. Now's our time. If he's feeling the heat and feeling that he needs to cozy up to Muslims, they smell weakness, and they're ready to pounce and make things more difficult for you. But I mean, I have to say what a disaster. What a disaster. Because I don't know much about Putin, but in my mind, when I think of Putin, I think of like this guy riding around on a bare-chested, chugging a bottle of vodka, riding around on this bear, right? That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking like this super, super tough dude. And now he's like, oh, Muslim. Wait, here we go. He's like, oh, will you guys keep fighting Ukraine for me? Like, what is that? It's like, are you joking? What happened to your bear, dude? Putin, if you're watching this, this is how you do it. You say, look, you guys are gonna fight for me, or I'll just go full D Wood here and just rip this thing up every day. Get out there and fight the Ukrainians now. That's what they would actually listen to.
That's it. But it seems like the whole Western world has gotten the idea that if we just reach out to these people in kindness, then they will return it. And they never do ever because they see it as weakness. And so Putin, this fearsome character in the Western mind, the enemy of the Western alliance, of the NATO alliance, and so on, he turns out to be just as wrong-headed, just as weak as the rulers in the West. Kind of ironic.
But people never give up on that whole their hearts will melt theory. That's the idea. We'll just keep if we just keep praising their prophet and praising their book endlessly, and we just keep inviting more and more and more jihadis to kill and slaughter. If we just keep looking the other way as they gang rape little girls, and so eventually their hearts will melt and they'll rush out to us and hug us. Someday, Robert, just watch. It'll happen.
Yep, it's going to happen. It's just like the other thing. 1400 years it's been another way, but that doesn't mean that it always will. It's going to be different this time. Who said that? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Here's
Yeah.
another guy who does that.
Oh man, I was just thinking Putin. What a dork, man. Again, I didn't like him, but I thought he was like someone like a pretty intimidating figure. If I see you a non-Muslim kissing the Quran, you are the least intimidating person on the planet to me.
Yep.
I'm like, you pathetic little weakling coward. So
Well, we
yeah,
got
that's kind of
another.
Muslims are not going to respect him for that. Non-Muslims are not going to respect him for that. No one respects him for that. He just shot himself in the foot.
This here on the picture now, this is Pope Frank.
Hmm.
Pope Francis. He's got the. This is my favorite picture of Pope Francis because
Because he sees nothing. He sees nothing.
sees nothing.
I see nothing. I see
Precisely.
nothing.
His vision is completely covered over, and this manifested itself again recently. Pope Francis, to his credit, as far as I know, David, he has never kissed the Quran. Pope John Paul II, his predecessor, kissed the Quran in 1998, which you could say arguably, although Pope John Paul II should have had some idea of history, but that was before the real virulent recrudescence of jihad that we've seen in the 21st century. Pope Francis has not kissed the Quran, but he's done pretty much everything else. You know what we got this week, David? It's kind of a banner week for Christianity because a new sin has dropped. There's a new sin out there.
It's always good. It's always good because you got all the deadly sins and stuff, and it's just good to come up with another one.
Yeah, pride, anger, lust, sloth, all that. That's old stuff. Now, the Pope has said that it is a grave sin, David, not just a little one, but a very major sin to refuse aid to the migrants who are streaming into Europe. He says if you oppose the mass migration and Islamization of Europe, it's a grave sin. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, go straight to hell, go directly to hell. That's it.
Then, Robert, should we be looking at 14 centuries of Islamic jihadis trying to conquer Europe and people there refusing to be conquered? Should we look at them as like 14 centuries of evil people for not wanting to be taken over by Islam? A bunch of evil, sick people.
That seems to stand to reason, does it not? I mean, if it's a grave sin now, then it must have always been a grave sin. So Charlemagne committed a grave sin when he fought the jihadis. Charles Martel, when he stopped the jihadis at Tours,
shame on him.
Sin. Yep. He
Vlad the Impaler.
Yep.
It's not just because he turned into a vampire, ladies and gentlemen. He was bad for refusing to let the Ottomans come in and take over.
Jan Sobieski, he should never have rode into Vienna and stopped the Ottomans on September 12th, 1683.
Can we say shame on the Allied powers for resisting the German and Ottoman alliance to conquer us all? We should have just not defeated the Ottoman Empire.
It's not very well known, but the Ottoman Sultan during World War I declared World War I a jihad. Nobody paid much attention because by then the Ottomans were essentially a spent force, and most of the Muslims were not paying any attention to what the Ottoman Caliph was saying, but he did say it was a jihad. So he was coming in. He wanted to come into Europe. Certainly, we're talking about migrants, and the Pope said there are those who work systematically and with every means to reject migrants. Now, I think that would certainly include invading armies. They're essentially migrants. They want to take over the territory and transform it. And the Pope says when this is done with conscience and responsibility, it is a grave sin.
And, can we say if you end up with a bunch of migrants who, as we've seen over and over and over and over again, want to form rape gangs and groom little girls and turn them into sex slaves and gang rape them and so on, that any sort of resistance against this why wouldn't this be a sin as well?
Yeah, you're just not being welcoming.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
Jesus said, welcome the stranger. That's really the idea that the Pope's got here.
Hmm. Smart Pope. Smart Pope.
One of the smartest ever. Certainly the smartest Pope in modern times. All right. Meanwhile, the jihad is raging in other parts of the world, as you may not be surprised to hear. And one of the biggest stories, actually, one of the biggest stories that we have had altogether in terms of jihad attacks, has taken place this week in Burkina Faso, in Central Africa. And in Burkina Faso, it was kind of bitterly ironic in its own way, in the town of Barcelogo. In Barcelogo, Burkina Faso, the security forces got together a bunch of civilians to dig trenches so that their security forces would be able to be more efficiently deployed. They were, in other words, shoring up the defenses of the area against Islamic jihadis. And Islamic jihadis appeared while they were doing this work, and the death toll right now is over 500 and could climb still more. Over 500 people killing those who were actually working on defenses against the jihadis in Burkina Faso.
Well, maybe they should have listened to the Pope and
Yeah.
not tried to defend themselves and just welcome in the jihadis to slaughter them in the name of Allah. That's apparently the only
Yeah.
good thing you can do.
I think that, yeah, otherwise it would have been a grave sin.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't have that.
Mm-mm.
In a related story, David, about all that Festival of Diversity business and all the insanity that came with it, I neglected another story because it was out of the UK, not Germany. And I have these very efficiently organized by country. But the UK story was Sky News, which is an establishment media outlet in the UK, and they were talking about the stabbings at the Festival of Diversity, and they said that they were worried that this would give power to the far right. And what they were most worried about, with 3 people dead and others wounded, was that the far right might benefit from this.
Yeah, and this is just this is like an extension of what we always heard after every single terrorist attack carried out in the name of Allah in the US or Canada or Great Britain or anywhere else. We always heard, right, I mean, while the dead bodies are still warm, we would hear, and the Council on American Islamic Relations has this warning that this not lead to a backlash against Muslims. And somehow, even when Muslims are slaughtering people in the name of Allah, Muslims are the real victims every single time.
Mm-hmm.
But this is kind of like that. So now the new extension is, a bunch of Muslims just did an attack. We have to worry about the far right having a problem with this. And so now, every time you got jihadis slaughtering people in the name of Allah, the real concern is the far right. No matter how many, and you could have 1 million Islamic terrorist attacks back to back, and every time, guarantee you there will be. And this is why we need to worry about the far right.
Yep. This could lead to more Islamophobia. And it really, you got to hand it to CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and other groups like that, because they know how to play these people like fiddles. People like the Pope or Olaf Scholz or all their counterparts in the United States. They have perfected the whole thing, so that I used to keep track of this at Jihad Watch. Every time there was a jihad attack in the United States, San Bernardino, Fort Hood, all of them, the Boston Marathon, the establishment media first story would be, local mosques ask for extra police protection, worried about a backlash. Mm-hmm. And the CARE spokesman would be up there talking about Islamophobia. And it was every time, And
it was always very interesting, the hypocrisy, right? Because, okay, so you're a Muslim. No one's coming to attack you. It was Muslims who were attacking other people. But somehow you're allowed to be concerned about imaginary people coming to attack you. You're allowed to look at the population and say, we feel like we're in danger from people who might come attack us. And yet, if you're on the other side and you said, hey, given all these Islamic terrorist attacks, I'm concerned about Islam, you're not allowed, right? You're not allowed to be worried about the spread of Islam. You're not allowed to be concerned about someone attacking you. But Muslims were allowed to be concerned about someone attacking them, even when they were the ones who were attacking other people. They were allowed to say, you know what, we're just terrified of this population out here. We don't know who's going to do it, but we're allowed to be terrified that someone over here is going to attack us. And we're totally allowed to say, we want more security. We need more security to protect us from all these people out here who aren't attacking us at all. But if you're on the other side going, given the number of Islamic terrorist attacks, tens of thousands since 9/11, I'm a bit concerned about Islam. You're an evil, horrible person. So if they're concerned about imaginary attacks, which never happen, they're fine. If you're concerned because of the endless supply of Islamic terrorist attack, you're racist and a bigot and Islamophobe and you have a mental disorder.
Yep.
Interesting stuff.
Here's a guy who is suffering that right now. He looks like Mr. Clean with his bald head and his earring, but...
Like Uncle Fester.
Uncle Fester, okay. But he's actually suffering a tremendous injustice. This is D. Stitt. David Stitt, who goes by D. D. Stitt. And he is a politician in Northern Ireland. And he was actually arrested when he was coming back to Belfast a few days ago. What's interesting about this, David, is that probably if he was out of the country, he did not notice that the UK had become a totalitarian police state in the few weeks or whatever, few days that he was gone. But with Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, now the transformation is happening quickly. So D. Stitt, he gets off his airplane in Belfast and he gets arrested. And he is being held without bail. He is a dangerous character. Held without bail. What do you think he did? Was it a murder, a rape? He committed Islamophobia, David.
What did he post something on? He post something on Facebook or something?
Yeah, he said, the Christian West is under siege, and people have one chance to stop the spread of evil Islam. He's in prison being held without bail for saying that on Facebook.
And as you've seen, they're clearing out the prisons of murderers and rapists to make room for these guys.
Oh yeah. I got a story about that somewhere along here. Couple of big jihadis are going to get sprung. Let me see if I can find them quickly enough. Actually, I know I can find their picture. Yeah, Rangzieb Ahmed and Mohammed Zahir Khan. There they are. And Rangzieb Ahmed on the left there, he was a close associate of Osama bin Laden. And so he was a high-placed jihadi. And the other guy, I'm trying to find the story, fairly prominent jihadi himself, but I don't want to hold us up unduly, unfortunately. Oh, actually, that's going to be over with the Stupid Infidels section, David. I should know that by now. Here we go. Mohammed Zahir Khan is an ISIS, Islamic State jihadi. All right. Rangzieb Ahmed was jailed in 2008 for plotting mass murder and was caught with a book of terror contacts written in invisible ink and a rucksack that contained traces of explosives. All right. So that guy, he was on his way to committing a jihad massacre. And Mohammed Zahir Khan is Islamic State fanatic, is all the story says here. So anyway, they're getting out. They're in prison for many years, but they're getting out to make room for guys like D. Stitt, who said Islam is evil. Now you'd
And
think that.
oh
Go
yeah,
ahead.
we've been talking for years about you get these guys who do some, failed attack, or there were preparations, or they were providing material support. So they don't actually kill someone. They're just providing material support to a terrorist organization, or they go and join ISIS and then they come back after ISIS loses. But sometimes they don't know, people don't know what these guys did. And
Mhm.
so they let them back and they give them sentences of like 8 years, 10 years. And all we were saying when this was happening was, if you're sentencing like guys that are terrorists, and if you're sentencing them to 8 or 10 years or something like that, these are guys who are getting out. They do years of prison dawa, uh, radicalizing other random people who come in there, make them convert to Islam and so on, and then convert them and then transform them into jihadis. But then these guys are actually getting out. You're going to you have to let them out. And here you have, well, we need to accelerate the letting them out process to make room for all the people who criticize jihad. How many life sentences do you think we'd be doing if we were over there right now, Robert?
Oh my goodness, they'd put us under the jail.
Yeah, you're lucky. You're lucky you're banned, because you might have just gone back for some reason. Then they lock you up. Like, yeah, we locked you up for criticizing. I mean, we banned you previously for criticizing jihad, Robert, but now we just throw you in prison, throw away the key.
Mhm. Yeah, I got to ask you, what do you think if D. Stitt had said that the UK has to fight against evil Christianity? Do you
Mhm.
think he'd be in prison now without bail?
No, they make him prime minister.
Yes, indeed. All right, we got Muhammad al-Bar. That's not him. He's around here somewhere. I knew I had him. There he is. Oh Allah, yeah, he's there. He is saying, "Oh Allah, grant victory to our Mujahideen brothers in Palestine." He is a Muslim cleric in Brooklyn, and in the course of this sermon, he also preached, "Oh Allah, annihilate those who occupied their lands, and those who betrayed and deserted them, and those who spilled their blood." Now, of course, it is a historical myth that the Israelis have occupied Palestinian land. The Palestinians themselves are a historical myth. But it is very clear that what he meant, Muhammad al-Bar, is that Allah should kill all the Jews, annihilate those who occupy their lands. And because the Quran says that in chapter 9, verse 14, that Allah fight them and Allah will punish them by your hands, this is clear incitement to violence, because he's saying, when he prays that Allah should annihilate them, he's asking Muslims to go and kill Jews.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's not the whole story here, because it turns out that Muhammad al-Bar is a friend and associate of the mayor of New York. And there he is with the mayor of New York, who is wearing a kufi, Eric Adams. That's Muhammad al-Bar, who just prayed Allah annihilate the occupiers of the Palestinian land, with mayor of New York, Eric Adams. Okay, so David, you ready? What do you think? Eric Adams issued a statement. He was actually asked about his association with Muhammad al-Bar. And what do you think his statement said?
Um, I don't know. I would guess he would be condemning people for Islamophobia or something like that. But
You're a genius. I don't know how
really,
you do it.
I don't
Yep,
know either.
that's
I
right.
just, Robert, all I do is I think of the dumbest possible thing anyone could possibly say, and I say it, and I'm just right 100% of the time.
Yep, that's it. And I'm just amazed. He said, to be fair, he said, hate has no place in our city, whether it be anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or any other form of bigotry. But anti-Semitism was actually in play here. The guy's asking that people go kill Jews. It's a
Yeah.
not so veiled threat.
Yeah, if you're saying you have a problem with it, if you're saying anti-Semitism has no place here, you should have a problem with this guy. But you don't. You have a problem with people who have a problem with this guy.
Which is why he drags in Islamophobia, which
Hmm.
had absolutely nothing to do with this story whatsoever. It's just incredible. Meanwhile, actually, speaking of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, there was a recent survey asking college students about their views of Jews in Israel. And they found that even after all this agitation and propaganda against Israel, 66% of college students do not hate Jews or Israel, or at least say that they don't.
Silent
However,
minority.
yes, that's right. However, 65% of Muslim students said, oh, yeah, I hate Jews in Israel.
Just 65?
Yeah, I was thinking, the other ones probably thought, I'm giving a survey, answering a survey
Yeah.
on a campus full of unbelievers. I'm not going to be forthright about what I think here. But 65%, they owned up to it.
Yeah. And so you're going to have a lot of politicians and journalists be like, we need to get that up to 100.
Yep. And really, it's probably much closer than people think to 100. All right, so this is on the right there in the picture. That is a woman named Moran Stella Yanai, and she was a hostage. She is an Israeli woman who was taken captive by Hamas. And she said almost daily, she's been freed now, she said almost daily one of them would enter the room saying, would be better for you to be a Muslim woman. And once the terrorist sent one of his comrades to get a head covering to put on me and show me what it means to be a Muslim woman. Stella also said that occasionally her captors would bring a Quran to read verses to her, demanding she praise Allah and saying, if you would convert to Islam, we would release you sooner.
Yeah, the old, hey, we jumped across your border, raped and tortured and slaughtered and burned tons and tons of people, and then we took you and a bunch of others hostages. Don't you want to convert to our beautiful religion that causes us to act like this? Isn't it great? Here, let us read you what the Quran says about Jews. Oh, it says you're the worst of creatures. Don't you want to convert to this religion that says you're the worst of creatures? It'll be better for you if you do.
It's incredible. And meanwhile, I should also note that while they are pressuring her to convert to Islam, they are telling her, they're asking her rather, how much do you think your father would pay for you? And trying to sell her back to her father. It's a hostage situation, of course. And in chapter 47, verse 4, and then amplified in Islamic law, there are rules given for hostages that you can kill them, enslave them, free them outright, or sell them, ransom them.
It just sucks because, if you're in that situation, you can't say what you want, right? Because what you want to say is something like this. They say, hey, how much would your father pay for you? You'd be like, well, way more than your mama pay for you. You want to say something like that.
Yes. All right, I actually got video. I can do video now here, I think, if I find it. There it is. Okay, so we have this video here.
Hey, one more thing, Robert, about that previous story. It is very interesting because in Gaza, they raise their kids to understand that their highest goal is to be killed. And so we love death more than you love life. Death. It's so great. All my kids, you'll see videos like this. All my sons died as martyrs. I feel so great about this. And when they're sitting there talking to Israelis and they say, hey, how much would your dad pay for you? And so on. They understand you guys love life and want people to live. You're not like us. And it's just this weird situation where, like, again, you have people who are raised all their lives to love death and to love the idea of their children dying. Mm-hmm. But when they're talking to Israelis, they know they have the complete opposite mindset and that they want to preserve life and protect their children. So how much would your father pay for you? And so it's like built. They understand that. They understand the thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's true. Actually, that's part of the boast, is it not? That, you know,
Hmm.
we love life, we love death the way you love life. And so they know, yes, we love, of course we love life, because the true God is the creator of life. But that's getting a little close to the bone, I suppose. Anyway, okay, back to this video, David. I don't know why they let you show the video but not the sound, but maybe you can explain that to me off air. But we can see what's going on here. This man is beating his wife, kicking his wife, beating her with a stick. Now, I'm confused, David, because I thought that you could only use a toothbrush.
Yeah, sadly, that's not what Allah says. That's what people make up. Um, in the Muslim sources, we have records of woman being beaten until her skin turned green, and that was fine. Muhammad condemned her. So yeah, this is a situation. But I mean, think people eventually intervened a little bit in that video. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what man's going to be walking by that and not just clock this dude? I mean, think about what
Mm-hmm.
Islam does, like culturally, to people,
Yeah.
because and how this is connected to Islam. Muhammad said a man will not be asked as to why he beat his wife. In other words, it's none of your business. It's none of your business. If a man is beating his wife, he is allowed to do that. Keep your stupid face out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there you see them all doing this, and we're sitting there looking. It's like, how did someone not just walk up and just clock this dude? I mean, he's doing it right in front of a little kid. There's a little kid right there. There's a
Yep.
little kid seeing
Could be
this.
his son. Could be his mother.
Yeah, and this
But
kid's growing up where that is completely normal. How does no one just walk out and just knock this guy out?
well, what's noteworthy is that this is in Turkey. I don't know where in Turkey, but
What,
note
has
that
has anything good ever come from there, Robert?
yeah, me. Uh, no, no.
I know,
Hatun,
I know.
Hatun.
Yeah, yeah. I normally say that about AP because he's Turkish. So we got you, AP, and Hatun.
Well, I am not Turkish. They are,
Mhm.
but they kicked me out. They stole my land and kicked me out, and I have no right of return.
It's what they do.
Anyway, notice though that Turkey is still nominally secular, even though the president Recep Tayyip Erdogan is working to re-Islamize it. This woman is still walking around with her head uncovered, her hair openly visible, wearing jeans. Nobody is bothering her. But notice that the woman who's being beaten, she's wearing black and she's wearing a hijab. And so it's likely, I think that it's reasonable to surmise that the men who come and they try to stop him and they intervene, they are probably more secular. And they don't take so seriously Islam's permission to beat your wife, much less in public. Whereas he is more religious, and so well, when you are believing that this is something that God has said, then this is going to be the kind of behavior that you engage in. Meanwhile, we have more hatred of the Jews in American mosques. This is Imran Salha, who is an imam in Detroit. And he says Islam is the last hope for America. Islam is the last hope for America. So think about that guy beating his wife, and think about this guy saying Islam is the last hope for America. But Imran Salha, he's, I think, got kind of a shaky grasp of the concept of analogies, because he says every time you go to a protest and you make the Zionists uncomfortable, you were rewarded by Allah. All right, and that's reasonable. That, you know, the Quran says strike terror in the hearts of the enemies of Allah. I suppose annoying them is a moderate version of that. But in any case, he goes on to say they are the cockroaches of history, and we are the liberators. Now, I think that would make sense if he said they're the cockroaches of history and we're the exterminators. But maybe he didn't want to get that explicit.
Hmm.
But people don't usually talk about being liberated from roaches. They exterminate roaches.
Hmm.
And I suspect that that was really where he was going. What do you think?
Yeah, probably. It does tie in. It's Surah 98, verse 6. Worst of creatures.
There you go. They're like animals. Meanwhile, in Nuremberg, where Hitler used to have his big National Socialist Party rallies, the Muslims gathered together with the black flags of jihad outside of Nuremberg Cathedral. Now, all I saw was this video circulating. I didn't see any story about what exactly they were doing there. But what is the symbolism in itself of going outside a cathedral with black flags and standing there in front of the cathedral waving them? What do you think that's all about?
Islam is obsessed, always has been, with controlling other people's places of worship and taking them over. Islam, the Quran, the goal is to make all religion for Allah, and so that's why Muhammad takes over the Kaaba, which was a pagan center of worship. That's why they had to have Hagia Sophia. That's why they lose their minds when the Babri Masjid is broken down because they absolutely loved taking control of that area. It's all everything is tied together. I mean, Muhammad as a caravan robber believed in forcibly converting people, actually forcibly converts people retroactively by saying that Moses and Abraham and Jesus and everyone, they're all Muslims. It's just, hey, we just, you don't have to actually go out and wage jihad. I can just write a bunch of nonsensical stories about how these guys are all Muslims. So the people who are still alive, you force them to convert. People who are not there, you just say they were all Muslims, and you go around taking over everyone's place. He has the mentality of a caravan robber. I just go out and take everything I want, and then it's mine. Even though it's yours, if I take it, then it's mine. And anyway, that's what you get.
All right, well, we started with a reference to Keir Starmer in Britain, who is, of course, locking up people who complain. We spoke about D. Stitt, who said Islam was evil and was arrested when he arrived back in Belfast after being out of the country, and he's now being held in prison without bail. I wanted to note, in connection with all that, as we are coming up to the end here, David, that in Pakistan this week, an Ahmadiyya and three of his friends, three other Ahmadis, but the main charge is against the one. They were arrested. They're charged with blasphemy for burning the Quran.
Yeah.
It's funny how often this happens in Pakistan, that people end up burning the Quran, and it actually turns out, of course, because their Qurans all over the place, there are loose pages of the Qurans from used up copies or discarded copies around, and you find some guy inadvertently steps on it or something, or he's burning some trash, and he gets charged with blasphemy.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the reason why I mention this story, because this is the kind of story happens, unfortunately, all the time in Pakistan, is that the story noted, the Pakistani press noted, that a heavy police contingent was out to arrest the alleged blasphemers. A heavy police contingent. They got jihadis all over the place in Pakistan plotting who knows what, and they don't have any problem with them. But guys suspected of blasphemy, and that is a massive police exercise. And I thought, this is where they're going. This is where things are heading in Britain now, is it not?
And you see Ahmadis being persecuted in wherever they are in the Muslim world, so much so that they had to move their headquarters to the UK. They had to move their headquarters to the UK. And what are the Ahmadis doing in the West? Complaining about us, Robert.
Yep.
Because we're exposing jihad when they are actually targets of jihad. If any Muslims are going to be on the same side with us, you'd think it's those guys. Nope, yeah. We're still the enemy, even though we're ultimately trying to help them.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I was really surprised by that some years ago, that there was a spate of persecution of Ahmadis in Pakistan as well as Indonesia. and I was writing about it regularly. And the more I wrote about it, the more I heard from guys like Qasim Rashid and Harris Safar, the leading Ahmadi spokesman in the United States, and they were just venomous in their hatred. They're completely in line with the Muslim Brotherhood agenda, even though it's people with the same ideology of the Brotherhood that are persecuting them in Pakistan. It's craziness.
Mm-hmm.
But so is the rest of the world, David. And, well, there's always more jihad, but I think an hour is good for what we can all stand. In the meantime, though, there will be more, and where there will be jihad, there will be David and I. Is that right? David and I, or would that be David and me in that context?
David and me.
There
I
will
wasn't
be
going to
David
say. I
and
wasn't
me.
going to say
Okay.
anything, but you asked.
Okay. Well, there you go. So we'll have some grammatical jihad as well. And all that will be likely next week, God willing. And until then, pray, hope, and don't worry.